I met Miss Fowler in July of 2002 when I first was hired here. It was kind of an interesting experience because I was told about her that I had a very senior teacher here.
If I were to sum up Mrs. Fowler with a single word, it would be compassion. And I think that's the driving force behind her longevity.
I mean, she's not only the oldest teacher in New York State, she's also the second longest employed teacher. She has grandchildren of original students.
Roxbury is a warm community. It's nestled in the Catskills. The population is made up of people whose ancestors have lived here for generations.
Roxbury is like I've died and gone to heaven. Roxbury is a unique community where people are caring, people know each other.
This is a community that was traditionally a farming community, but there's been an incursion of new people coming in. There's a large second home population, a lot of summer and ski homes in this community as well.
The families that attend here and the children of those families are salt of the earth type families. Certainly many of the parents are professionals. We also have blue collar workers, skilled workers among the parents, hard-working people. People who care about family and values.
It's a family here. Roxbury Central School is a family. A lot of us, like I have two of my own children. I handed my own daughter a high school diploma last year. A lot of us are related to our students. If not, they're our neighbors. It's a very kind of intimate school atmosphere and school setting. Very stable faculty. We don't have a lot of turnover here. People come and they make it a career.
Roxbury School is around 350 children. Our district covers nearly 200 square miles. So the heart of our community is the school district.
This is a K-12 school. Our largest grade right now is 4th grade. There are 44 kids. And our smallest grade right now is actually 3rd grade, which is 19. So it's kind of a challenge sometimes because you have to deal with these large bubbles of kids and then small bubbles of kids that come through.
I think you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who doesn't know Mrs. Fowler or recognize her car or her figure walking down the street. She is that well known in the community.
I met Mrs. Fowler when I moved here, actually, because she was the 5th grade teacher and I was in 5th grade, even though I wasn't in her group. As far as was it odd working with her, a little bit, because could have been my teacher, even though she wasn't. She was there when I was in 5th grade, so it was kind of strange.
When I first met Mrs. Fowler, she stopped by the office when I was hired here and welcomed me in her own gentle, kind way.
I was astonished that Mrs. Fowler wasn't a volunteer in the building, but a full-time faculty member. Astonished because she had obviously been doing what she loved for a very long time.
It was a surprise to find out that there was a teacher here at the time, 87 years old, still teaching in the system. And then to meet her, I discovered the reasons why.
She plans to be an educator as long as she can be useful and supportive and helpful to students.
Through and through, she absolutely loves teaching and loves kids. Her enthusiasm is something that you do not always see in this business or any business.
Teaching is a very stressful position. It's a stressful situation at best. In working with Dora, as I have, she's very even-tempered.
Very caring about other people, very considerate about their feelings, and making sure that when she's working, she does the very best job she possibly can.
I grew up in a small town near Oneonta, a small town called Wells Bridge, and I grew up on a farm. My father and mother purchased the farm In fact, my father would not marry my mother until he had $1,000, so he would be sure to support her. And that was a long time ago, and $1,000 was a lot of money. And they had a farm and doing fine, and then he contacted a cancer. Three weeks before my father died of cancer, my grandmother that they were living with also died of a stroke. And so it was very difficult for my mother.
They came from very humble beginnings. It was a struggle growing up, financially, but they got through it as a family, and I think that really did instill a lot of her values that still remain with her today.
My mother worked very hard, had to work hard, and she earned very little money for what she did, doing housework and cooking for people and sewing for people, because she didn't have an education. She had planned to be a nurse, but she started her education, but then she got married, so she wasn't trained to be anything beyond doing menial work, really.
We respected her tremendously. I mean, we didn't do things to offend her because we knew how hard she worked.
The fact that my mother had to work hard and the fact that she was widowed has helped me face the things that I had to face in my life. The things I remember when I was smaller in the world at that time, it was a very prejudiced situation. I lived in this small community, and I was Protestant, and we were very prejudiced against Catholics, and I thought Catholics were terrible, which I've certainly learned different since. And also, Ku Klux Klan was just getting started then, and my uncles and my mother were members of the Ku Klux Klan, and as a small child, I remember them dressing up in those costumes that they wore, and they sincerely, completely believed in what they were doing. You know, it was such a prejudicial time, but there were wonderful times too. They used to have parties at houses in those times, and they had dances, square dances, and I'm so glad I'm so old that I can remember things. People have no idea about it today. Things like an ice house. They used to cut ice and to keep the milk in the summertime. And they had an ice house. And I was not a very cooperative child, and I would get angry often. And I would climb up into the ice house and sit on the sawdust to keep cool. And people wouldn't know where I was because I had been bad, which was often. And I went up there. It was my hiding place. And I remember that so well. I'm so glad that I have that in my memory.
She's always even at that young age, I'm told, was always very spirited and headstrong and had her own mind.
She was really a character. She was naughty quite a lot of the time. She really was willful. She was.
You see, we had very little contact with other children. We lived on the farm, and we walked to school, and other children walked to school too. And so my brother, my sister, and I more or less made our own entertainment. I went to college it was an insurance policy for me. I was going steady with my husband, but I went to college because I felt I had something, if something happened to him, I would have an education. And that's the sole reason I went to college. And I went to the State University, which was a normal school then, because it was the cheapest place I could go. And I worked for my room and board. I loved to read books. I just craved reading, and I read, and so that I wanted to be a librarian, but I could not afford to go to college to be a librarian. And the cheapest place I could go was a normal school, and that's why I went there. And it was the right thing to do, but I didn't. At that time, felt that I had to get an education. I had a drive within me, And I really have a lot of faith in God, and I think God wanted me to be a teacher all the time. I had graduated a 3-year course, and then I worked in the tuberculosis hospital. Then I got married, and I did not work. And I did not work for 5 years. And then my husband died, and I had no choice. It's so ironic. After my husband and I had been married the same number of years that my mother and father had been married, my husband was the age that my father was when he died, and I was the age of my mother. And I had 2 children, and only different, she had 3. So I went back to college to get refresher courses and applied for a job. And at that time, after about 5 or 6 years, they couldn't find teachers. So I was very fortunate. I had no intention of getting married again, no intention of all. And the phone rang, and this man asked me if I would go out with him. And he mentioned the name of a girl that I knew, that I trusted. And I think if anybody had asked me to go out with him, I would have. I was so tired. And I said, there are 3 of me. There's only not one, there are 3. And he said that was all right. And so we went to the movies that night. And from then on, I just enjoyed him a lot. And I got to the point that I was falling in love with him. And so I decided to tell him, we were on our way to church, and I decided to tell him that I am not going to get more involved, that I'm not going out with you anymore because I'm not ever going to remarry. And my daughter was in kindergarten at that time, and she sat there, and I glanced down, and his big hand was over her little hand. And I thought to myself, you cannot be that selfish. You have to think of your children. And so from then on, I let myself fall in love with him and get married. And he was a wonderful father to my children. My teaching career has been that I taught 5th grade. I'm not sure the number of years, but it was a good number of years. And I had earned my master's degree in college, a master's degree to teach English. And I had several hours in teaching science. I certainly think I probably was in my 50s when I was still teaching 5th grade, and that's when the principal said to me that he wanted to move me up to junior high and to in high school English. A few years ago, they asked me to work in AIS, which is helping special needs students. And then the last 2 years, they've put me in working in language arts in the grades again. So I'm back to 5th grade where I started.
My sister's seen many things happen during her years of teaching. Unusual things and bad things.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
I remember when President Kennedy died. I remember the crying. I remember the students crying, the teachers crying, and the school. It was just a tragedy for all of us. And it was just like we really knew him. He was very real to us, and he was very real to me. I felt like I knew him. It was just a blanket went over the classroom. It was announced over the loudspeaker that had happened. We didn't go to school. We didn't have to go to school. We stayed home and watched it. We did have huge televisions. We stayed home and watched it on them.
Duck and cover.
We had drills, air raid drills, and and at that time people were building bomb shelters for themselves, and we were conscious very much of the fact that there was a war, and we learned a lot about it in school, and we practiced in the hall things we had to do if there was an attack on our school. It was strange. It was so far away. You see, it wasn't right next door to them. It wasn't like it is today that something happens and you almost hear immediately.
A second plane also hijacked.
I'm a renegade as far as doing things differently. And sometimes that has not always made me too popular with other teachers, but I've got results.
In my first years here, she went to the middle school level and was teaching English language arts, English. Not only was she teaching English, but she was teaching old-time grammar. Old-time grammar, sentence structure, and what is called in the business Latin etymology, which is root words. And so children are learning the meanings of words that they haven't even been exposed to yet with Mrs. Fowler.
I do not feel lecturing is the best message. I very often would tell, especially when I taught high school, I'm going to talk to you 5 minutes or maybe 10 minutes, I promise. And then there'd be activities that they would be involved with. I just don't believe that they're going to listen that much to lectures. I taught in the grades for years before I started teaching high school. And homework, for example, I let them tell them I wanted to work a certain number of minutes or hours, maybe an hour, and then they'd write me a note and tell me what they did. And they had a choice of what they wanted to do. And oftentimes they do more than I required of them. Oh, I know I'm best known for the fact that I take them over to Kirkside Park to write. I know I'm known for that. We selected, and each child had their own area and wrote about that area, and therefore I was getting my language arts in there too. And we raised money to go camping, so I was getting a lot of math in there. So I think my style of teaching was more that I was trying to use the things they were used to and that I felt they were really going to need. I feel each student, and I guess all teachers do, I look at them as individuals with individual needs. If I know a child is struggling and doing the very best they can, I'm a little easier with their grading than I am with a student that it comes very easy for. On the other hand, I like to challenge the ones who can do better to do better. So I maybe am a little hard on them. I'm not terribly proud of this, but the junior high students are very nervous, especially when you go from 6th grade to junior high. It's a big step, and you're nervous about your grades, and you're trying real hard, and especially if you're a mediocre student. And so I used to stand up on a chair and throw the report cards all over the room. They had to find their report cards. I do not feel it's right to have to teach for the tests. On the other hand, if you do not teach for the test, they're not going to pass the test. And I think that this has curbed a lot of real education. And having taught as long as I have, I know it's a phase that will pass.
The standards are fine, but I think we need to have much more flexibility to allow teachers to be teachers and to allow students to take full advantage of their learning experience, rather than just worrying about those state tests and how that's going to ultimately look in the newspaper when the reports come out in terms of how well a particular school or class did in terms of their performance on these state tests.
Tests and always being told you got to get ready for the next class, I think that's wrong. I think you should, teachers should help students get the very most they can at the level at which they are.
I think she's instilled a lot of other benefits in these students as well. Working hard, that sense of setting a goal and achieving it, all those things that are what I call lifelong lessons that to go way beyond the state tests and way beyond just the academic subject matter.
You can't really enjoy something if you're told all the time there's something harder ahead of you. And I've always firmly believed if students survive high school, they're going to enjoy college. The biggest change in education, I believe, is the lack of respect that children have for education. And I think partly it's because of the computer age, and they can get all the information they want there, and so why bother? And they get an education because they want to earn money. But I don't think they have respect for education that they had at one time. When I started teaching, it was possible if you wished to slap a child, you could slap them. It was all right. And if they misbehaved and they went down to the principal, they would be disciplined physically. But of course you can't do that today. But I think I've never really had problems with discipline.
Mrs. Fowler is grandmotherly. And being grandmotherly, the children give her a great deal more respect in the classroom. And it's a charm to go into her room and see children who may have been a little wound up earlier in the day, calm, considerate, and working hard on their work, solely because it's Mrs. Fowler who is there teaching them.
I never physically felt I wanted to discipline a child, but my age is a big help as far as has been for years, because people like their grandmothers. And but they don't care for their parents, some of them, but they like grandmothers. It's difficult for a young teacher to start teaching now. The respect is not there. Teaching tools have definitely changed. When I started teaching, they had old-fashioned mimeograph machines, and there wasn't even, you didn't even use typewriters a lot then. You printed more of your own work, then typewriters, then gradually they got these other machines. Of course, there weren't anything like computers or anything like that, teaching tools. You manufactured your own things. Dress code for me has not changed. I feel teachers should dress as teachers. I do not go along with the way many teachers feel about it. I don't feel that you should try to be a student. I feel that you gain more respect if you dress as well as you can, so they can look up to you.
I would be shocked if I saw Mrs. Fowler arrive at school in pants. I have never seen her anything but very nice dress and heels.
I tell you what happened to me a few years ago. I was working with a student, and everybody, the other girls were wearing slacks. So one day I wore slacks. He was furious with me, and he said to me, this is a high school, junior high boy. He said, "How would you like it if I wore a dress?" And I didn't wear slacks ever again after that to school. I'm sure kids can't stand the thought they're going to have an old teacher, not a young, pretty teacher, But after about a month, I think they don't realize I'm old.
I grew up in a family that taught me to respect my elders, that we need to learn from our elders. One of the things that I've been very interested in my life is the study of World War II, because I'm a history major originally, and we're going to lose the World War II vets. We're going to lose the veteran teachers.
Regardless of age, people in general are able to help each other with our own areas of expertise.
I guess the only thing that bothers me is that people, when you get old, people expect you to be old. You know what I'm trying to say? They expect you to be old. They hear your age, they expect you to be old. And they have certain preceded ideas about how old people are. And there are a lot more people like I am than not, I think. I just don't exactly know how to say it is to feel you've outlived your students. How I've outlived my colleagues. I'm not sure why I outlived anybody, except that I just believe God has a plan for me. And I miss them. I miss the people. But I thoroughly enjoy the life I am living with the people that I'm living with. My son lives in Maine, my daughter lives in Tennessee. It's hard for them to know their mother lives at 88 that she's living by herself in a small community, away from a city where there's